In today's tutorial, we are going to be making the Gusset-Free Gertie. Why do I call it a gusset-free bag? Because there is only one piece of fabric that we're going to be dealing with. Traditionally, in a bag that has some depth to it, meaning how wide this is, you would sew your zipper onto two pieces and then add a bottom piece to make a loop, and then you'd sew on a front and a back. And that piece going around this way is called a gusset. In this bag, you won't be making any gussets. In fact, this is a super easy bag for a beginner to make, and it's made from one big piece of fabric. And I have quilted this bag. I have the instructions written for a quilted piece of fabric, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I quilted this one using a non-traditional interfacing. So I'll show you that when I tell you all about the supplies that you'll need. But you can use other stuff like quilt batting or flexi foam or soft and stable or anything like that. But I had a little scrap of something non-traditional laying around, so I'll tell you all about that when we talk about the supplies you need. This bag is designed to wear as a sling crossbody, so you wear it that direction or that direction. I always wear mine going this way, but you can wear it as a fanny pack. It is got a little depth to it. It does look a little bit bigger on me because I am like 4'11", so it may not be this big on a regular size person because I am quite short, but it is got a lot of depth to it, so it'll fit a lot of different things. I made this one out of this really cute cotton canvas that's got figment on it. So he's from Epcot. If you know, you know. I made it to wear to our next Disney trip. It's got a really cute little figment zipper pull. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a fun rainbow lining with 2 pockets on the inside. And I think that this will fit all of my stuff that I'm going to need to go to Epcot next month on our next Disney trip because we're big Disney adults. So I also used metal hardware on this one. So you've got a D-ring attached to your strap so that when you're wearing it, you can clip a water bottle or sunglasses or whatever you need to it. It's got an adjustable slider so you can adjust the strap to whatever size you need. I used metal hardware on this one, so my buckle is metal, but you could use a plastic one, which are readily available at most craft stores. I ordered these off of Amazon because I wanted the metal one. And yeah, so it's a super easy make. So if you guys are ready to make the Gusset-Free Gertie, stay tuned and I'll show you all the supplies that you need. Okay, the supplies that you're going to need are going to be some sort of fabric and batting. You'll need a fabric for the outside and the fabric for the inside. And you can use really any kind of fabric for this. The patchwork one that I made was all quilting cotton, and I just did like a patchwork design on there, and then I cut out my pattern out of that. This one is going to be from some custom printed cotton canvas. It's got figments from Epcot, if you know, you know. Big Disney adults, so I'm going to make this as my park bag for our next Disney trip. And so this came in like a set that was pre-printed for a tote bag pattern, and I'm not going to make the tote bag, and so I'm using the lining fabric from that for this bag. So I've got my piece of the rainbowy stripes for my lining. I've got the piece with figment for the outside, and because this was a directional print, I cut it a 1/4 of an inch bigger, well, a 1/2 of an inch bigger than the measurements in the pattern, and then I cut it down the middle, and then I sewed it together. So that'll be the bottom seam, so that when my bag wraps around, my direction will be going the correct way, facing the correct way. So one side won't be upside down. If you have a non-directional print, like this is non-directional, it could go really any direction, then you don't have to do that. And then for the batting, you can use any kind of batting. You could use flex foam, which I'm a huge fan of flex foam. You could use quilt batting. And the one that I did that was patchwork, that one I did with regular quilt batting. But I had some car upholstery head foam. What is it called? The thing, headliner foam. fabric stuff. So it's like headliner fuzzy on one side and then it's foamy on the other, and it's pretty thin. And so I thought, I had some of this laying around and I had a piece that was like the exact size for this project. So I thought, let's try quilting on that. See how it goes. You know, let's get a little creative. So, so to mount the fabric to that, you can, before you quilt it, you can either use something like this. This is 505 temporary adhesive for fabric. I also have one that is called quilt basting spray. Basically, it's just a temporary spray adhesive that won't gum up your needles. You spray it on, you stick your fabric down, and it helps it so when you're quilting it, it doesn't shift around on you. You could also just put your fabric on there and pin it all together. So I'm going to sandwich that headliner foam in between my two fabrics, and I'm going to quilt it. Now you can quilt it any like pattern that you want. You could freeform, you could make blocks and rows. On the patchwork one, I sewed along the seams, so it made little squares. I think for this one, because it's kind of got like this wavy print, I think I'm just going to freeform it on this one and do some free motion quilting on this one. So I'm going to sandwich my liner in between my two fabrics, and I'm going to quilt that. And then you will square up your piece according to the measurements in the pattern so that you have a nice square piece. So it's always good to start out with, if you're quilting something like that, it's always good to start out with a piece that's a little bit bigger, a couple inches bigger all the way around. And then that way, if your stuff like shifts any, you can square it up and make sure that the sides are nice and straight. Other things you're gonna need for this project are a zipper. I cut this one, might have cut it a little bit too short. You want to cut it a little bit bigger than your project so you can also make sure that the sides are nice and square. So I have this cool splatter paint rainbow zipper. I thought that would go good with that. This is zipper tape, so it's like zipper by the yard. So you can cut it off to whatever size you want. It comes on this big, long, like 5-yard piece. And then you can just make any size zipper that you need from that. I love zipper by the yard because you can also add really fun zipper pulls to it. So most zipper by the yard comes with zipper pulls, but I happen to have found these really cool. I don't know that you're able to see it. I'll show a close-up later of it. But it's Figment's head, so it goes perfect with this fabric. And this one is actually in like a rainbow metallic finish. But I just thought that would go great on this zipper with this project, so we're going to do that. You'll also need a D-ring, the same size as your webbing. So you'll need webbing. I got this one from Wonderground Fabrics, and it is also a rainbowy color for the strap. So I thought, well, you know, might as well run with the rainbowy thing here. So this is a 1-inch wide webbing. It's a nylon webbing. So I'm going to use 1-inch hardware. If you wanted to make the webbing thicker and use a 1.5-inch webbing, you can do that, but you're going to have to figure out how to adjust your strap connector pieces for that. But make sure your webbing and your hardware sizes are the same size. So you'll need webbing, you'll need a D-ring, a slide pull, so this makes your strap adjustable. And then for this project, I'm going to use a metal buckle. It's still got the little plastic on it. Hang on, let me peel that off so I can open it. Prevents it from scratching during shipping. But I'm going to use one of these buckles that snaps together like that. They come in plastic too. You can find the plastic ones at places like Walmart, Hobby Lobby, Michaels. The metal one, I ordered these off of Amazon because I couldn't find any metal ones anywhere around here, and I wanted a silver metal one for this. So you're going to need that. So you'll need some bias tape for this. You can cut your own binding strips if you want to, just 2-inch wide strips. You're going to be binding all of the seams on the inside of this bag. But I saw this at Hobby Lobby the other day when I was there, and when I saw this, it like totally reminded me of the webbing that I had, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would be perfect for this project. So we're going a little out there on the fabric choice here and the colors. So you'll need some sort of binding. You can cut your own strips, you can get bias tape, whatever you want. And then you'll also need a piece for the inside pocket if you so choose to put a pocket on there. Now, because this was like a pre-printed panel, I didn't have enough of this to cut my pocket piece, except for with the selvage edge that wasn't printed. So I'm going to use that because it won't show in the end. It'll be on the inside of my pocket because we're going to sew this together. And so that'll end up being the back of the pocket. So use up what you have. I'm a big fan of using up every square inch of the fabric because, I mean, it costs you a lot of money. So you might as well use up every square inch. So even if it's got some wording along the selvage, a lot of times if it's not going to show in the finished project, I'll use it because why not? So you need a piece for your pocket. Like I said, all the measurements are in the pattern. So I'm going to get these, I'm going to do the spray adhesive on these and get these all connected together. And I'm going to go quilt that off of camera because it's going to, that's the thing that's going to take you the longest on this project is quilting it. So I'm going to do that off camera so we can get to sewing the back. All right, I have free motion quilted my piece, and then I trimmed it up to the measurements in the pattern to make sure I have nice straight edges. And then I took my pocket piece, which remember had the selvage edge on the back or on the top. I sewed it together, right sides together into a tube, turned it right side out and gave it a good press. And I just moved the selvage edge to the back side of it. So once you make your pocket on here, you're not even going to see it. I also folded it in half and made a crease along the center because you're going to sew that down to split this pocket into two. And mine is wider than it needs to be, but we're just going to roll with that. You'll need a ruler and you're going to measure down 2.5 inches or 2.25 inches from either edge on the shorter edge of this rectangle. And I think I'm going to go on this side because my design has more of the, I think this will look better on the front of my design. So I'm going to make this be the back, this side be the back of my design. So you're going to do this on the inside of the fabric. So you're just going to pin your pocket 2.25 inches down. And we're going to pin, just pin it on here and center it up the best you can. And then you're going to take it to your machine and you're going to sew down the edge across the bottom and back up the other edge, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And then you're going to sew down the center where you made that crease, back stitching really well at the beginning and the end of that, because that's going to be where you're going to get the most stress from your pocket right there in the middle. So I always like to back stitch really well when I'm putting a pocket on, then that way, you know, when you're pulling on your pocket, it won't unstitch. So let me get this on here straight and I'm going to take it to my machine and sew down the sides, across the bottom, up the other side, and then sew the center of the pocket. I also forgot to mention that you're going to need some other little pieces for your strap connectors. So I will show you those in just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to see if I like this angle. I'm kind of trying to play around with some angles of my filming. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim these off to the same size as my rectangle here. Not really sure why I cut those so long on this one. And then we're just going to sew this right down the sides. Now I'm using some variegated thread that I got from Wizardry Stitchery. That's one of my favorite places to get thread because you can get a big cone of it. So I'm going to sew this at 1/8 of an inch down the edge and along the bottom. I'm also trying out a new presser foot that I got from TikTok Shop. I normally have 1/8 of an inch presser foot on here, which I really like. So I'm trying a new one, and it's a 1/4 inch presser foot, and it's got this quilting guide already on it. I'm having mixed feelings about it because I'm so used to sewing with 1/8 of an inch presser foot that I don't know. To be determined whether or not I stick with this one or not. I definitely feel like I can sew straighter with the 1/8 inch foot on there. Okay, now we're going to sew down that center crease. Be sure to backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now we have our pockets on here, and now we have 2 pockets. And I'm going to trim up the threads, and then we'll move on to the next step. Our next step is going to be to put in our zipper. So I'm going to trim this right here, and I'm going to run a lighter over it because that will get any of those little fraying edges. So you just take, because the zipper is nylon, it will melt when you run it through the flame. So you just seal up the ends of your zipper like that, and then that way these won't fray. So we're going to put our zipper on the short ends of our rectangle. And so the way we're going to do that is, because I have zipper by the yard, I'm going to set my little zipper pull aside. That's why I love zipper by the yard, because then that doesn't get in the way. But if you have a pre-made zipper, just pull that zipper pull off the end of your fabric. That's why it's important to have one that's a little bit longer than your fabric. You're going to take your zipper and you're going to put it face down on your bag. So right sides together. So the right side of your bag to the right side of your zipper. And you're going to clip it in place or pin it in place. I love these little clippies. They make it just so easy, and then you're not putting holes and stuff. And you get these on Amazon. I got them linked on my Amazon storefront. I've also got them linked in my TikTok, whatever it's called, the showcase, whatever it's called. Anyway, I switched back to my 1/8 inch zipper foot because I have sewn with this for so many years that I literally have a hard time sewing with any other foot. Plus, if you have a zipper foot, a 1/8 inch foot on here, you don't have to switch over to a zipper foot when you do zippers. So we're going to sew this pretty close to the teeth of the zipper all the way down, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so we have our zipper attached to our bag. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to trim this seam allowance down about half so that it will cover, whenever we fold this back and top stitch, our zipper tape will cover the raw edge of this. So just trim this down as close as you can. Don't cut your zipper tape though. Okay, once you have that trimmed, we're going to take your bag and you're going to flip it over to so that the inside is facing up. And then you're going to take your zipper tape and fold it down. You can pin it. You could put some double stick tape to tape it down. They make double stick tape for sewing. I have a couple of rolls right here, so that works really well. You could take it to the iron and press it down. However you can get this to stay down, you're going to press it down. I like to just go with the flow, so I roll mine under and then I just hold it while I'm top stitching. So you're going to take your zipper tape, you're going to fold it down, and then that should cover the raw edge where you trimmed it. And then you're going to top stitch from the front about 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge right here. I know this is getting kind of hard to see. This was probably not the best choice of fabric to do a tutorial on because it is all colorful and whatnot. But you're going to stitch this on the top side, so it's called top stitching. And you're going to do it 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge right here. Just making sure that you're folding this tape down that way while you're stitching. So what this is going to do when you're stitching this down, it's going to prevent any fabric from rolling up into your zipper when you're trying to zip and unzip it. I know sometimes you get those bags or a dress or something and you get your fabric caught in the zipper. This helps prevent that. So, and plus it makes it look nice and neat and tidy once you top stitch. So you've top stitched that down. Now you can go back and do another row of stitching from this side just along the edge of this zipper tape. and that'll create 2 lines of stitching on the front, and it'll help keep that zipper tape down. It works out to be about 1/8 of an inch from that first line of stitching. That's why I love this 1/8 inch foot, because it makes it super easy to line up and do really narrow hems and stitches on things. So I just did my row of stitching pretty close to the edge right here, about 1/8 of an inch from that first row of top stitching, and then that'll give you 2 neat little tidy lines on this side. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So what I like to do is fold my fabric, put my fabric right side up with my zipper right side up, fold the other side of my bag towards the zipper so that the right sides are touching, and you want to make sure that the sides are lined up nice and straight right here. So we're going to clip this together, making sure that these sides are nice and straight. And then this is the other benefit of doing zipper tape. If you have a pre-made zipper, you're going to want it longer than this so that you can do this next step. But what I love about zipper tape is you can take it and you can pull it all the way apart. And now you can sew with it nice and flat, and you're not trying to work around the bag being rolled together. So we're going to do this the exact same way. Stitch right along the zipper teeth, trim your seam allowance, fold your zipper tape back, top stitch, and then do the second row of top stitching from the back side. All right, now we have our zipper on both sides. Now we need to put in our zipper pull. And I have a tool that I use and I sell in my shop called a zipper jig. And I know I show this in almost all of my videos that I do with a zipper, but let's go over it one more time in case you haven't seen it. This is called a zipper jig. And in order to put the zipper pull on your zipper, you can just take it like this and finagle it and wiggle it and slide it on this way. But this comes in handy when you do lots of them. It kind of works as a third hand. So you put your zipper pull on here with the flat side facing you and the pointed side up. And then you're going to take your zipper and you're going to do this with the back side of your zipper facing you. And you kind of line up your fabric to figure out which side of the teeth is a little bit longer, if that makes sense, because that's going to be the side you're going to start with. So when I line up my fabric edges, it looks like the right side of the zipper teeth is just a little bit longer. So we're going to put that side in first. So we're going to put that side in, the zipper pull, get it lined up in that channel. And then we're going to put in the other side and line it up in that channel. And then you just pull down. And because this zipper jig is holding your zipper pull, it just glides right on. And then you can zip up your project. So I like to push my zipper on. Don't pull it really fast because you can pull it all the way off. And then sometimes if your zipper looks a little wonky, it helps if you zip this all the way off and then re-put it back on, and that'll realign the teeth a little better. So now we're going to take this and we're going to fold this in half, and I'm going to make sure that my zipper is sitting flat up at the top, and I'm going to mark this center point down here on the fold. And I'm just going to do that with a pin. You can clip a little triangle into your fabric. You can mark it with a marking pin, however you need to. We're going to mark that center point. So I'm just going to pull my zipper kind of flat over here on this side and then fold this in half and then mark that with a pin. And then we're going to refold our bag down and we're going to center the zipper teeth with that pin. And I'm going to clip that. And then on this side over here, you're just going to kind of hold the teeth together because you're going to want this zipper pull out of the way of your seam. Just hold your teeth together, centered up over where that center mark is, and clip it. Once you have it clipped, take your pins out so you don't sew over your pins and upset the sewing police. I don't care if you sew over pins. I've been doing it for 40 years, never had a problem. So we're just going to remove those for right now. And then you're going to measure in 2 inches because you're going to end up cutting out the boxed corners of these. So what I like to do is I like to measure in where I am Let me find a marking pen that will show up on this fabric. I like to measure in how big my boxed corner is going to be cut out, and I like to back stitch right there so that when I cut that seam, it doesn't unravel. So you're just going to measure in 2 inches because we're going to be doing a 2-inch boxed corner on this, and I'm just going to mark where I'm going to back stitch on all 4 sides. So when you sew this, you're going to sew all the way across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but at those marks I like to back stitch to reinforce that. I also like to back stitch over where my zipper teeth are, just to reinforce where the zipper is going to stop. So when you get to those little marks, just do a little back stitch and go all the way to the end. Now on the open end, you're going to want to make sure that your zipper pull is out of the way. Just hold these teeth together so when you stitch over them, they kind of stay very close together, so they don't get all crazy on you. All right. The next thing we're going to do is trim the ends of our zipper. So if your zipper tape or zipper is hanging over, trim that off, run a lighter over it, and then we're going to mark our boxed corners. Now I'm going to mark my boxed corners and cut them out before I bind this side. Then that way I'm not wasting binding on what I'm going to cut off anyway. I have this really cool little marking tool. It's from Carolina Little Stitches, and it works great for doing these box corners. So when you're marking box corners, even when you're using one of these tools, you're going to measure from this seam, from the stitching right here. So I'm going to put my 2-inch mark on there, and then I'm going to put my 2-inch mark down here, and I'm going to mark my boxed corner. It's going to seem like you're cutting off a lot, but just trust the process. It makes this a nice little boxy pouch, and this is why I call it a gusset-free Gertie, because traditional bags that have some depth to them, traditionally you would make it with a gusset, a zipper gusset. This way you don't have to make a gusset. You can do it the boxed corner method, and it turns out the same without having to do a gusset with a zipper in it, which is a more advanced technique. So we're just going to go ahead and cut these box corners out. That's why you want to back stitch at the 2-inch mark right here. So when you cut this out, then this seam won't pop open. So cut out all 4 of your corners. All right, once you have all 4 of your corners clipped out, you're going to take this and we're going to put binding over this little seam right here. So that's why I didn't bind the whole seam, because you're just going to cut this out anyway. So I'm going to go get my bias tape, and I'm just going to cover these sides with bias tape. Oh my gosh, this bias tape is like the perfect match to this bag. That's crazy. Okay, so we're going to box our corners. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to kind of pull this diagonally, and it's going to magically match up. So I like to have my pocket on the back side of my bag. So that is where we're going to put our little strap connectors. So I am going to go make the strap connectors first, and then we're going to box these corners out, because you're going to insert your strap connector into whichever side you want as the back side of your bag that's going to be facing your body. So let's go make the strap connectors. Okay, I have marked my little pieces of interfacing per the measurements in the pattern. So we're going to be making these little strap connector thingies, and they're kind of like whatever this shape is, trapezoid shape. I am using Decoville Light as my interfacing because it's a little bit of a heavier interfacing. It's going to give those strap connectors a little bit of stability. It can be kind of hard to find Decoville Light, especially now that Joann's is going out of business. I don't know if Hobby Lobby carries this, but any heavyweight interfacing will do. If you feel like you need something a little more heavyweight than what you can find in the store, you can always layer your interfacing with 2 layers for that. You also want to make sure when you make the marks that you mirror them, because they need to go on opposite sides, of course. So I'm going to cut these out, and then I'm going to iron them onto the back side of 2 of my little squares here, because that's going to give us a stitching guide to stitch around so that we can get this shape and connect our straps. So I'm going to cut these out, and then I'm going to iron them onto the back side of 2 of my squares. All right, I have taken my webbing and I've cut a 6-inch piece off, and I'm going to melt that last edge on it. This is also nylon webbing, so you can do the same thing as you did with your zipper. If you have cotton webbing, that won't work. So now we're going to take our 2 pieces that have the interfacing on them and the 2 pieces that don't, and we're going to put them right sides together, and then we're going to insert our webbing from the wide end into the skinny end in between the 2 pieces of fabric. Does that make sense? So we're going to put our webbing in like that. And you can leave it sticking out just a little bit so that you can make sure that you're going to catch it. But you want it centered on this shorter edge of the interfacing right here, because we're going to sew right along this interfacing, leaving this side open so that we can trim off the excess and then turn it right side out. And then we'll have our little strap connectors. So I'm just going to put a little clip in that so that the webbing doesn't move, and then I'm going to sew right along the edge of that interfacing. Let me get this nice and squared up here. All right, so we're sewing right along the edge of the interfacing. And I like to backstitch over the webbing just to give it a little bit of strength. Make sure it's going straight across. Give it a little reinforcing. Did I say interfacing? And now we're going to trim off the excess, clipping across our corners. Make sure you don't clip any of the stitching. I like to leave this end long so that when I go and top stitch it, it has something to grab onto in there to give it a little bit of strength. So then we're going to take this and we're going to turn this right side out. So you can just kind of tuck the end down in there and pull on your webbing to turn it right side out. And then I like to take my point turner. Let's find it in my little caddy. I have these point turners listed in my shop too. My husband 3D prints these. These are great for poking out corners on all of your bags or projects. So I like to poke out the corners nice and make sure they're nice and sharp, right angles. And then you're going to take this over to the iron. You're going to give it a good press, and then we're going to top stitch around all 4 sides at 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to repeat this on the other one, and then I'm going to go iron these and top stitch them. Now we're going to insert our strap connectors into our boxed corners. And this took me a minute to figure out. I like wearing my crossbody pouchy things from hanging from my right shoulder and then going across my body down to the left side around my waist. So if you like to wear it the opposite direction, you may want to reverse the strap on this. You may want to kind of play around with it to see which way you want it to go. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take the shorter one with the 6-inch strap on it, and it's going to go in the left corner over here. So we're going to pull these diagonally, and we're going to make it nice and flat. I like to push my seam allowance from my zipper. Let's get that zipper pull out of the way. I like to push my zipper. I like to push, holy cow. I like to push my seam allowance, I'm having a hard time talking today, down towards away from the zipper. And then you're just going to line that pocket back up. You could base that pocket back into place from where we clipped the corners if you want to. And I'm just going to insert my strap into that corner, centering it up with this seam. And then you're going to clip or pin all of this together nice and flat. So we're going to pull all of that nice and flat to where you have nice flat edges or corners out here. Make sure that you poke the inside fabric out nice and flat also, so that it doesn't get bunchy in that seam. So we're going to make sure all of this is lined up, and then we're going to clip this into place, and we're going to sew across this corner at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you're going to repeat that on the other side, tucking the long side of the strap down in there. So you kind of want to tuck it down in there and make sure it's not going to get caught in any of the seams. And then pull this side nice and flat, centering that strap connector up and reconnecting that pocket back in there. Clip that and then sew this one at a 1/4 inch seam allowance also. Then you can do the front ones. They're much easier. You just pull them flat, sew them at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you've sewn across all 4 of your corners, kind of trim it up, make it look nice and neat, and then we're going to put bias tape or binding on these also. So let me finish all 4 corners and then we'll bind it. All right, I'm just doing this the simple way to put bias tape on. You can take this and sew this on like that and then wrap it around and top stitch it again. But I'm going to do it the lazy way, so sewing please don't come for me. You want to be sure that you can feel where that seam is, because you don't want to sew any further in this way because it will mess up your boxed corners and they won't be nice and even. So I'm just going to wrap this with my bias tape and clip it into place. And then on the ends, I'm going to fold the end of the bias tape in so I have a nice finished edge. You're not really going to be able to see it because it's going to be inside the corners of your bag, but I like to make it neat and tidy on the inside. So I'm just going to clip these on, and then when you're sewing the bias tape on, feel where that seam is and sew right over that stitching or even a little into your seam allowance so that you don't make the boxed corner any bigger than it was to start with. That way they're all still nice and even. And I just back stitch, and then I'm kind of feeling with my finger where that line is. Now going over this seam can be a little bit thick. Just go slow so that you don't break your needle and it doesn't skip any stitches. And then your raw seam is bound, and make sure you caught all your bias tape on the other side also. Now you can use pre-made bias tape. You could cut your own bias binding. I do have a tutorial on my website. It's a free tutorial how to do magic continuous bias binding, but really because this isn't curved, you can just cut little strips that are like 2 inches wide and fold the raw edges in and do this same thing. So I'm going to bind all 4 of my corners, and then it's going to be time to turn it right side out. All right, it's time for us to turn our bag right side out. So we've bound all of our seams. It has all finished seams and the pocket on the inside. So now we're going to turn it right side out, and we're going to poke out the corners. And hopefully you haven't sewn over your strap in there. I have done that before. It is not fun because then you have to unpick everything. So I'm going to poke the corners out with my fingers. And this is why I call it the Gusset-Free Gertie, because you have made a boxy bag or a it's not even a box. I mean, it is a boxy bag, but like traditionally when you make a bag like this and you put in a gusset, that's what gives it the depth. So it looks like it has a gusset running around it, but you don't have the seams all the way around, and you don't have to, it's much easier for beginners because you don't have to go around the corners like you would with a gusset. So it's kind of taking the boxy bag method and making a crossbody bag with it. So that makes it lots of fun. Okay, so I like to wear mine this way, and this is a lot of print going on. I'm wearing my dress. It's actually Easter Sunday, and my whole family had other things to do. So not really had other things to do. We really didn't have anything going on. So one of my sons is driving back to college today with his girlfriend. My other son works at a church, so he had church service this morning, and then he plays in a band, so he has a gig this afternoon. And his girlfriend is going with him to all of that. And then my daughter and her best friend decided to go get lunch at Texas Roadhouse that just opened up at the front of their neighborhood. And I didn't really want to go eat. And then my husband decided to go play poker in a poker tournament today. So I'm all dressed up for Easter, wouldn't know where to go. We did go have brunch though this morning. So yeah. But anyway, so I like to wear mine going this direction. So I'm going to put my hardware on going that way. And what I was saying when we put the strap connectors in, if you like to wear it the other way, I mean, you could wear it this way with the straps this way, but if you like the clasp in the front, then you'll need to reverse the direction of the straps. But I like to wear mine on my right shoulder. So on the short end, we're going to add, I'm going to take my clip apart, and I'm going to add my, I guess you would call this the male end of the clip because it goes into the other side, but the side with the buttons. And we're just going to put the strap through it, making sure that the front of the clasp is facing out towards the front of the bag. And you're just going to fold your strap over about an inch, and then you're going to sew that on like so. Now on the other side, we have to do the slider to make it adjustable. So I'm going to zoom in close so you can see how to do that. It's a little confusing. And so in the instructions for this pattern, I am linking this tutorial so that, because it's kind of hard to type out how to do this. So I'm going to, so that's the easy side. And then we're going to do the other side. But first I'm going to put a D-ring on this side, because what I like to do, because I'm wearing this at a theme park, is I like to put a D-ring on here, and about an inch from the end, I'll just sew it together like that, so that when I'm wearing this bag, I can clip a water bottle or my Mickey ears or whatever. I'll have a space to clip stuff with a carabiner too on that's hanging down and not hanging right in the front. So I'm going to put that on, and then I will show you how to install the the strap slide so that we can make this adjustable, and then we'll put the other end of the clasp or the buckle on that end. So let's zoom in so you can see that more closely. Okay, so for the easy end, the short end, you're basically just going to fold this over and just give it a good stitch right here. You could fold it over enough to where you could stitch a square box if you wanted to. I think I'm going to fold mine over about that far, and I'm going to stitch it because I think I'm going to eventually just add a little metal rivet to it. But since this is a beginner tutorial, I won't add any of the rivets because on there showing you, because most beginners don't have all the equipment that I have, and I have like tons of rivets and things. But so I'm going to fold mine over about an inch, and I'm just going to sew this down, back stitching a couple of times to reinforce it. Now my machine does not, sometimes it gets kind of messy, so I'll clean that up and straighten all those threads out, trim them off, and then I'll run the lighter over the ends of the thread to melt it down in there. That's why you want to make sure you use matching matching thread to your webbing so that if it does get a little messy, it doesn't really show. Okay, now for the other end. Okay, for the other side, like I said, I slipped this D-ring on here, and I'm going to just pinch it in here and sew across right here, just to hold it in there about an inch from the strap connector. My dog Goose just woke up from a nap, and he's like going around sniffing everything, so if you can hear him, that's what that is. So let's see if I can get this on here. And now the sun came out, and it's super bright, so there we go. That's another thing I like about these 1/8 inch presser feet. You can get really close to stuff sewing them on. Okay. So, and once again, I'll go back and trim all these threads and clean all this up when I get finished. So, now for the not hard part, but the hard to explain part. So, you want to make sure that your strap is nice and straight and not twisted when you do this. So you're going to take your slide piece and you're going to slide it in one side and over that bar and out the other side so that you've got your buckle on here and it can slide up and down. Then you're going to take your clasp and you're going to make sure that the right side is facing you. So you have the right side of your buckle and the right side of your clasp all facing the correct direction. And put your webbing through the bottom of that. And then you're going to come back, and how I like to do it is I like to take my webbing and push it up to where it's got some space in here so that I can maneuver. And then you're going to take the end of your webbing and go in, back in to that space, and then it's going to turn around and come right back out like that. Can you see that? So the end of your webbing has gone in and is going right back out. That's why you need the space in here, so you can get that in there. And then you're going to take this and you're going to sew this down to this side. If you have rivets, you could rivet this down and not even sew it. Just put a couple of rivets in there and that will hold that too. But since most beginners don't have rivets, you're going to end up sewing it. So you may want to add a little more space into that. So let's try to slide this down a little further. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit further so I have some more room to wiggle around here. So let's do that again. I pulled the end back out. So you have your buckle and your slide going facing the correct direction. On the back side, you're going to push your webbing up to where you have some room to work in here. You're going to take the end of your webbing and go back in and then turn it around and fold it back coming out the other side. So you want to make sure that it looks like that on the back. So you make sure that your bar, you can see your bar on the back. And then this is why you want to have a little wiggle room so that you can take this and you're going to sew right down here. I'm going to trim this off and remelt this end because it keeps fraying. So if you melt that down really well, then that won't fray out. So I'm going to take this over here on my sewing machine and you're going to have to kind of finagle it in here, making sure that you're not sewing over anything that doesn't need to be sewn over, and move all the metal parts out of the way so that you don't hit that with your needle. And just sew back and forth a couple of times like that. So you still have it bunched up like that. So now you can pull that flat and you have your slide that will slide up and down so you can adjust how long this is going around your body. And then you can take it and clasp it together. So I'm going to clip all my extra threads and melt the ends of those to get those nice and cleaned up. But that gives you an adjustable strap on your bag. All right, what do we think? We are done. I actually liked how this headliner foam worked as as like the batting to quilt it, because it gives it some stability, but it's not quite as thick as like flex foam or anything. Sorry if you can hear Goose. He woke up from a nap and he's being wild now. But I always wear mine going this direction. It's a little puffy for me. I'm very petite. I'm like 4'11". So it's a little, it looks a little bigger on me than it really is because I'm very short. But yeah, I think this is going to be like the perfect theme park bag because I can keep my phone and my sunglasses. You could probably even fit a 16-ounce water bottle in here if you really tried. But I mainly just take stuff like that and a little thing of Band-Aids or whatever to the theme parks. But yeah, I think it turned out perfect. I got my carabiner down here so I can clip a water bottle or my sunglasses or my Mickey ears or whatever too. You can take it on and off. And then the strap is adjustable, so you could potentially pull this up and wear it as a fanny pack. You just use your own judgment to your measurements to go around your waist for that. You may have to make the strap bigger or smaller, however you want. I just based it on a yard of webbing, but you can adjust the size of the strap if you need to. So yeah, I think this turned out great. I'm going to insert a picture of my daughter's because she forgot to bring it back to me. This is the one I made her. I just made it out of some scraps of her fabric that she makes her bags out of, and I quilted it all together and made her one for her to wear at her markets so that she keeps all of her cash in there. So when she's doing change for people at markets, she has it right on her body. But yeah, I think it turned out great. I'm going to go add rivets to my connectors and to hold my webbing in place, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And I think this is a fantastic way to create a bag with some depth to it without having to do a gusset as a beginner, because I like to try to make my patterns easy for beginners. And once you get down a few bags, then try something with a gusset in it. And what a gusset is the piece that goes this direction on a bag. So I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial, and I can't wait to see what you guys make with it. So be sure to tag me on social media at By the Bay Bag Co. I would love to see what fabric choices you made and how you put your combinations together, and what you think about the size. So yeah, so be sure to like and subscribe and all the things. I hate asking for that, but it does help the algorithm push this out to more people so that more people can see my tutorials and find my beginner friendly patterns and all of that. And if you don't know, I do teach an online sewing course called Quick Stitch Academy. It's a work at your own pace online course with video tutorials that teaches you everything you need to know as a very beginner sewer from the very beginning through several projects. So check that out too. It's all linked down below or at quickstitchacademy.com. And you can find this pattern and more at bythebaybagco.com. So thanks so much for watching.